You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. It's Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. Nice there. That makes it official. Welcome to the big show. As always, the Chris Voss Show is the family that loves you but doesn't judge you, at least not as harshly as the rest of the world, because we love you. You listen to the show to make your lives better, to improve the quality of your life, to hear from our awesome guests that we bring you 10 to 15 times a week that share with you their stories of life, their journeys, their lessons. Opinions expressed by guests on the podcast are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host or the Chris Voss Show. Some guests of the show may be advertising on the podcast, but it is not an endorsement or review of any kind. Today's featured author comes to us from bookstolifemarketing.co.uk. With expert publishing to strategic marketing, they help authors reach their audience and maximize their book's success. Today, we have an amazing young man on the show. We're going to be talking about his amazing insights and experience and how he helps people lead better lives. His book is come out January 28th, 2025. It is entitled Unparalyzed, Learning to Stand, Move. I'm sorry, let me recut that. I'm a little dyslexic, I guess, this morning. It is called Unparalyzed, Learning to Move, Stand, and Walk Again, Volume 1 by Dr. Jeffrey Thomas Lefkovitz. Did I get that right, Jeffrey?
Yeah, we'll take it. Pretty darn good.
I'm having some brain farting right now, evidently. I don't know what's going on. I might be having a seizure, so call 911 if I flip over. I'm just teasing. Anyway, the brain, it's old age, Chris. It's old age. It's coming for you. Yeah.
It's a tough name.
It's here and arrived. I switched the move and your title, your thing. I decided to invent your own title for your book. So What am I doing?
Yeah, maybe it's better.
In 2001, after more than 15 years of helping people overcome orthopedic injuries through chiropractic massage, acupuncture, natural medicine, and exercise science, Jeffrey had a patient that challenged him and changed his life. Gary, a paralyzed man, inspired Jeffrey to believe in him against all odds, overcome his diagnosis, and walk away. This journey led to the creation of technology and techniques that not only helped Gary to achieve his goals of walking again, but is currently being used by neurological rehabilitation and recovery centers around the world. Many other injured people that were told they could never get better are now learning that much more is possible. So welcome to the show, Dr. Jeffrey. How are you?
Doing good, Chris. How are you? Thank you very much for having me and giving me a chance to share a little bit about this book with you and your audience.
Thank you. And thank you for coming on. Give us your .coms. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs?
I have a clinic that's called Abilities Recovery Center, and the .com for that is arc-la.com. That's arc-la.com.
Mm-hmm. And give us a 30,000 overview. What's in that new book?
The 30,000-foot overview is that it's a textbook that I wrote about a machine, the one like right behind me, called the Voss, that I invented 14 years ago. And it documents the experience we've gained through thousands of clinical hours working with severe neurological injuries. Chris, all of our clients are paralyzed. Wow. They've had spinal cord injuries or strokes, traumatic brain injuries, multiple sclerosis, cerebral palsy, just to name a few. Everybody that comes to us is paralyzed. But what we've gotten from using this proprietary piece of equipment is we've gained a new perspective on how to overcome paralysis and teach people how to learn to move, stand, and walk again.
And so tell us the story that is kind of the hallmark of where this began with Gary, and give us a little bit of a run through his journey and how you work through building this machine.
Yeah, so Gary came to our chiropractic office, and this would have been back in 2010. And he actually had come to see my partner, who was the chiropractor. And I was called into the session to take a look at Gary to see if there was anything I could do extra to help. I had some background in chiropractic neurology and some background in just understanding neurology. Gary had been paralyzed at this point for 10 years. He slipped and fell in his kitchen, hit his head, broke his neck, and was paralyzed from the neck down. He was told that he was never going to walk again. And when I met him, Gary was 64 years old, and his mom, who was 82 years old, was his caregiver. He was a big guy. So he was about 6'2", 6'3", 230 or 40 pounds. And so very, very difficult when he can't use his arms and can't use his legs to do all the things that we do every single day. And so his family became estranged, and he was just left with his mother to care for him, doing everything for him. In hearing Gary's story, I was compelled. I really wanted to help him. And I asked him, if he would be interested in us working together so that I could see if there was anything I could do and possibly even learn to do. And so I worked with Gary for a few months, and he went from having his arms all kind of curled up to being able to move his arms and kind of in his hands just a little bit. And when he was able to do that, I took him to a friend's gym so that we could work together with Gary to try to get him to stand. And so we were trying to pick him up or carry him and get him to stand some way. And it was challenging. Being a biomechanics expert, I thought, if you're just picking somebody up or holding them up, they're not really learning how to stand. And I searched all around for equipment that was out there that would not only help Gary stand, but let him also walk again, do gait training, and also to stand and exercise. And when I looked at all of the equipment that was out there, I didn't find anything that biomechanically made sense. And every piece of equipment was ultra expensive, tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And each of those pieces of equipment had basically one thing that they would do. One piece of equipment would stand somebody up. Another piece of equipment would help them do gait training for walking. There was nothing out there at all for standing and exercise for paralyzed people. And, I really did a lot of praying, a lot of meditating, thinking about Gary and his condition and how better to help him because, he was my only client at that time that was paralyzed. And I didn't have $100,000 to $300,000 to put into equipment. And as I was thinking about it over a period of time, I finally got an idea or a vision for the machine, the Voss, that I eventually created.
Wow. And what was the proponent behind that? What motivated you to care about that and try and see a better vision and a better widget, a better way to help people? This is what entrepreneurs do. They create they see a widget, whatever the product is or service, and they go, I can do that better. What was the proponent behind that? What was the inside you that made you go, I think I have the answer for this?
For one, I've always been professionally, I've been in the business of helping people through natural health. And so I always had compassion for people to help them to get better. In Gary's case, like I said, there was no pieces of equipment that served all the purposes that I wanted. And being a biomechanical expert, I saw equipment where people were hanging from ropes with a harness around them. And I know that restricts movement. I rock climbed for several years, and I know that it always feels funky being in a harness. Also, they have exoskeleton suits, and you have to bolt those onto people. At this point, I've been in every single exoskeleton suit on the market, and I can tell you that none of them move like normal walking. So when I'm in them, I have to really let go and let the exoskeleton do all the movement, but it doesn't feel like normal walking. And we're dealing with neurological injuries. And in order for the neurological injury to be overcome, we have to learn. And if it's something that's awkward, something that is restrictive and doesn't let you move right, or makes your movement happen in an awkward way, you're going to learn compensatory type of movement, awkward movement, and it's not going to register as well with the nervous system. So again, being a biomechanical expert, I was seeking for something. I wasn't able to find it. And so I created this Voss machine, which doesn't have any harnesses, doesn't have any exoskeleton pieces. It's kind of an open platform that's super safe. People can't fall. They're completely protected. Regardless of their functional level, we have people that can just pretty much just move their eyeballs all the way to people that can actually ambulate with a device like a walker or a cane. And they can all get inside this machine and safely learn how to walk again because it gives them the right space to do the right biomechanics. And another thing that we found that's really important with the machine is it directly connects their feet to their ground. Where when I'm in a harness, my feet aren't really connected to the ground. I'm really connected to the harness in my crotch, if that makes sense, because that's what's holding you. And the exoskeletons basically have a platform that you're standing on. So you're standing on this platform that's holding you like a ski boot. And I don't know if you've ever walked around in ski boots, but it doesn't feel like normal walking around. And so by creating this piece of equipment and working with Gary, like I said, I worked with him for about 2 years. He came to me at first paralyzed after being paralyzed for 10 years. I worked with him for 2 years. And at the end of the 2 years, the man who was told he was never going to walk again went from wheelchair to walker.
Holy crap. That is amazing. That is amazing. And all through the use of your machine, working with you and all this stuff. Wow.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and we've had, from that, it really made me motivated to work with a larger population of people. And now, like I said, thousands of clinical hours working with severe neurological injuries. We've really learned something that I think is a breakthrough in this industry. And I know from going around and teaching, because now we produce these machines in the United States and in Switzerland, I've learned by going around through teaching that this perspective is a novel perspective, that clinics are not using what we've learned, but when they do use it, we get instant results.
And I can see, I believe, on the cover of the book, Unparalyzed, Learning to Move, Stand, and Walk Again, Volume 1, I guess that's a picture of the current machine. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, that is a picture of one of our machines, yes.
Okay. And I can see here the gentleman, he appears to be standing on the floor, and then he's using braces to walk, or I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, he doesn't have any braces on. So in the picture of the book, that particular individual doesn't have the full use of his hands. And so he has special gloves on his hands to help him hold on to the machine. Okay. And then the therapist, her name is Jess. The therapist is behind the machine and underneath on a little rolly scooter, and she's helping the patient move his legs in the right biomechanical pattern so that it feels like and mimics normal walking.
I remember years ago, this reminds me of years ago, my friend, I was going to be the best man at his wedding, and he had a massive injury from a car accident that had impacted his vertebrae, and then they had to start fusing his vertebrae, and with the fusing, you eventually fuse everything, I guess, from what he told me. And he was walking with a cane, and I said to him, I said, you're really struggling with this walking with the cane thing. Why don't you just, use a wheelchair sometimes? And he goes, Chris, you don't understand. This is a battle for quality of life. If I go to that wheelchair, I lose the muscles that I used to walk, and then I can't walk anymore. And it's downhill from there. And I was like, wow, I never really thought about that. So some of the things you're talking about with making sure that those muscles that are actually used for walking are being applied and developed. And so do you find that it's just getting the muscles back into shape, or is it part of just re-engineering the whole brain neurosystem? I'm clearly no scientist, to, get everything to start working and regenerate or redevelop itself. Is there a regeneration process that takes place?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Chris. And that kind of gets to some of the heart of what we've learned. When I first made these machines for Gary, I would say that I kind of got lucky in helping Gary to walk again. The machine is very safe, as I had mentioned. You can't fall. There's padding all around it. And so the first thought with the machine was to create a safe space for people who can't stand or walk safely on their own to be able to do where they could go for it and kind of push their limits. Again, I kept it wide open so they could move with the right biomechanics. And I tried every exercise in the book that you would see in any kind of gym or any kind of rehab setting. And we got fantastic results. People were able to build a little bit of muscle mass. Their bone density improved. Their cardiovascular improved. Their quality of life improved. But what wasn't happening consistently, we certainly got people to go from wheelchair to walking. But I feel like, from my experience, that those people that did so just kind of needed an opportunity to do something and push their limits, like I said. But across the full range of our clients, we weren't getting that neurological change to improve function. And one day I used to, this was pre-pandemic. I've gotten a little older since then and maybe a little lazier, but I used to work 7 days a week, seeing clients every day. And I would work from 9 a.m. to 7. with these clients. And this was one of these days towards the end of the week. I was working with a client that was a very big guy, very heavy guy. And I was doing an exercise called sit to stand, which is simply going from a seated position to standing. It's kind of like a squat from a chair. And it's very commonly used in this industry. And from a therapist perspective, what we typically have to do is you have to have one person kind of holding the person's knees so the knees don't buckle, and you have to have another person behind kind of pushing the person's butt up. And so they kind of push the person up over the knees. Or if you don't need that person behind, you can have the person grab onto a bar and they can kind of pull themselves up, but you need to block out their knees. And this was 8 years of using the Moss. I had the same experience, thousands of hours, where my hands were on those knees. And in the Moss, I'm actually sitting behind the person, so my hands are holding their knees in this orientation. And so I had my hands on his knees. He's a very heavy guy, and I felt the same thing I felt thousands of times. As he went to stand up, his knees begin to slide forward into my hands. I have to brace my grip so that I'm holding his knees from buckling and helping him come up. And it was exhausting. I used to do this thing, and everybody who was paralyzed, we had a chalkboard and we had everybody's name that did it. I used to do this thing where we did 100 squats or 100 sit to stands. And for somebody that's paralyzed that can't move, and you say, hey, we're going to do 100 squats, they're like, we're going to do the what? You know? And so anyhow, on this day, my hands were very tired, end of the week, heavy guy. And as he was coming up, I felt all of his weight move forward into my hands. I'm bracing with everything I had. And I'm thinking in my head, how am I going to be able to do this long term? My hands are killing me. And how are my patients going to actually learn how to stand if I'm having to help so much? And at that moment, it dawned on me that when you stand up, our knees don't go forward, they go back.
Yeah.
And
I hope so.
I thought, what is that? What's doing that? And that's when we started to learn really how to control the nervous system again. And that's what this machine does, is it helps people regain control by helping them communicate properly with the nervous system and helping them coordinate properly with the nervous system. Now, communication is the biomechanics. Which way is their body moving? One way or another. Like, for instance, if I push my hand out, my shoulder is going to move forward with my hand. If I pull my hand back, my shoulder is going to move back. That's the communication. That's, if I move my shoulder forward, my body wants to reach forward. If I move my shoulder back, my body wants to pull back. That's the communication. The coordination is actually the order of activation. What lights up first? What muscles light up first? What structure lights up first? And then it works up the tree to create that movement. And when we're talking about standing or walking, Chris, do you know what the first thing is that is supposed to light up?
What?
It's going to be your feet.
Oh,
they
okay.
touch the ground. And
your
that's
feet got to adjust themselves so they can plant down, and
they've got to create a solid foundation for the rest of the kinematic chain to stack up on. And that's what we found. And that was one of the benefits of the machine, not only the space to move biomechanically correctly, but their feet are contacting the ground, where most of the devices out there don't have the people contacting the ground. And in doing that, this is the only machine that starts activation of the nervous system, which will eventually become muscle development. But first we have to activate. It starts activation of the nervous system for standing and walking from the ground up.
This is wild that you've discovered this. Now you currently sell the machine or lease it out. Maybe, I don't know what the deal is on how you work the financials of it, but you currently distribute this machine around the world or local US, and how does that work? And who are your clients out there, so that if someone's listening to this on LinkedIn or other sources that is in this sort of business, they can know that this might be something for them?
Yeah, we have 2 locations where we manufacture the machines. One is here in California in the US, and the other one is in Switzerland. And so currently right now, our market is the US market and Switzerland, EU, and UK. And we're looking to try to get into some other markets. Currently, would love to get into some other countries so that we can develop into those countries as well.
This is pretty exciting, all the stuff that goes into this. And boy, if we could get more people walking, it's one of those hard things to do. And yeah, my sister's in a wheelchair. She has MS and dementia, and
where is she? Is she in California?
She's in Utah, actually.
In Utah, it's close enough.
Yeah. And I mean, if you can see the atrophy in her legs muscles, her arm muscles, and everything else that she gets, because she basically moves from a bed to a wheelchair every day. And so it would be just amazing if we could have more of this around the country. Now, I noticed in the book it says volume 1. Is there more coming?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we're always learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I gave myself some leeway, being this is the first book I've ever written as being a volume 1. And really what the book teaches is these basic movement patterns. It's not accessible, and this might apply to your sister. It's not always accessible to get a machine or to find a clinic that has a machine. And so in the book, I mentioned that the machine really accommodates the process to help us learn to move, stand, and walk again. But the same mechanics and the same order of activation that we use to stand and to walk again can be the same mechanics and the same order of activation if we're laying down, sitting, or standing, learning to move again. And so in applying these concepts, like this book would be perfect for your sister. I wrote the book, and this was kind of a struggle in the beginning. So this might say volume 1, but there's probably like volume 100, negative 100 below it from all the times I tried to write this book. And so many times, I think I took the similar approach of all these kind of books where I start trying to talk about the anatomy and physiology of the nervous system and yada, yada, yada. And next thing I know, I'm lost in neuro outer space. And once I realized this communication and coordination to gain control of the nervous system pattern, I tried to simplify the book so that not only is it good for therapists to read, but it's good for people that actually are paralyzed and their family members, because really, people that are paralyzed and their family members, their caregivers, they actually become neuro experts. And so many people come to us where they have been neglected or haven't been shown a proper way of doing things. And so they've had to search for things on their own, and they kind of become neuro experts in their way. And so I wrote this book as a simple way for people to understand how to overcome paralysis.
Yeah, this might be a good thing to use at care centers and stuff to get people active. That's one of the problems with the care centers. They just kind of leave you in a bed and chair most of the time, and then they do other things. Now I see on the website, I'm looking at the website, and in the cutscene of the video at the top, there's a machine that looks like it has a electronic button on it, or some sort of electronics or some type. Is that the same as the one that's on the cover?
It probably is. I mean, it
looks like it is from the side.
It looks like one of these steel machines behind me. It probably is. And so
I see the big red button on the side of the book.
Yeah, the red button is just the on and off switch for the battery. So for the battery to connect, in case we need to shut the machine down or anything like that. There's no electricity that goes into the person's body. Everything is natural. What the electronic system does is it raises and lowers a padded seat that will help to spot the person. And so we'll bring the seat up to a certain height, so that the angle for somebody to stand is not as difficult. If I'm sitting down low in a chair, it takes more muscle recruitment and activation to stand than it does if I'm already like 3/4 of the way up into a standing position. And so as people are learning to move again, we'll raise the seat so it's easier for them to stand. But once they're standing, they're about 1 inch or 2 inches above the seat, fully weight bearing.
Wow. Yeah, and I can see this gentleman on the cover doing that, and it's got all these different adjustments. It's got like all sorts of adjustments through it that you can do with, I think, what do they call these, linchpins or whatever?
Yep.
So you can adjust people's height, their probably their size, and make it so that they can feel safe and comfortable. They're not going to fall. I mean, imagine that's a big fear that people that are paralyzed have when they try and stand up or they're doing this kind of work, that they might fall and injure themselves.
Yeah, no question. That's one of the biggest fears to overcome. We've designed the machine so that a person cannot fall. And believe me, over thousands of clinical hours, people have tested that.
Wow.
They've tested that to see if they can fall or not fall, not on purpose. Okay. But it's just that kind of stuff has happened. Now, the adjustability is built into the machine, and it's very fast to adjust to all different sizes of people and all different functional levels. And if somebody doesn't have any control of their core, it will have pads that can adjust to help them support their core. And then as they get better, we can move those pads away so that they regain that function and they don't need that support anymore. So it gives support where you don't have it when you need it, and takes away the support once you have it and you don't need the support anymore. Wow. Also, the machine is very, very efficient clinically. Its competitors are really any type of system that uses a harness or any kind of exoskeleton suit. And I'll tell you from experience, because I've done this for a long time, getting somebody who's paralyzed in and out of a harness takes about 15 or 20 minutes to get them in and about 15 minutes to get them out. And in a 1 hour session, you're spending half the time getting dressed just to get ready. Exoskeletons too, you have to pull out wrenches and screwdrivers and adjust everything for the person and then strap them all in. It takes 10 or 15 minutes or more, depending on how much adjustments you need to get somebody into an exoskeleton. With this machine, you just roll straight up with your wheelchair, slide right in, you're ready to go in less than 10 seconds.
Wow, what an amazing thing. And you just envisioned this, built it and tested over time, and I'm sure tweaked it and stuff. What's the future of what you're doing? Is there any new machines or advancements you're making? Yeah.
This is where you put a top secret banner right across the screen. Top secret. Yeah, of course. I mean, over the years, the first machine that I built for Gary didn't look like this. It was made out of wood and ropes and pulleys, and it looked like a really bad catapult. Something that nobody would really want to get into. And once I found that worked, because when I took it to Gary, the very first day I took it to him, he took his first step in 10 years. And then, over the 2 years, I developed the machine more. I taught myself how to weld. And thanks to YouTube, I taught myself how to weld. And started making machines out of steel. Wow. Once they became a little bit over my pay grade in technological advancement, I started to hire professional shops to help me build them. And, there's been several changes that we've made over the years to make the machine more adaptable for clients and more effective and efficient for therapists. In the future, we do have a couple of extra things that we're going to add. One of the things, I'm not sure if your audience knows this, but when somebody's paralyzed, it's not that they can maybe not just move, because that's obvious when somebody can't move. But the nervous system has a motor system, which is your movement, and it has a sensory system, which is your feeling. Oftentimes when they're paralyzed, they lose feeling. And so paralyzed people will rely on therapists to tell them whether or not they're doing a good job, because they can't tell if they're doing a good job. They might be sitting and they might be standing. They don't know how much the therapist is helping. And so because they can't feel it, and so they don't really know. And the next rendition we have coming out is we're putting a screen on it, on the machine, mounting a touch screen to it. And there's a technology called Surface EMG, which uses a little leads on people's body. And the leads, they don't put any electricity in the body, but what they do is they measure whether or not the nerve is firing, causing the muscle to contract. And so we're going to put those screens up there with the Surface EMG. We already use it. We just don't have it attached to the machine. We'll have the monitor up there with the Surface EMG. So people, as they're doing different activities in the clinic, can see in live time from the Surface EMG if things are firing.
That's really important to know and have, because you've got to get all that stuff reconstructed. On your website, tell us about some of the offerings. Do you do coaching, consulting? I notice there's a community thing on here. Tell us about some of the offerings you have that you offer on your website. I
actually have two websites, and the website that you're on, Abilities Recovery Center at arc-la.com. At the clinic, we just do neurological recovery 5 days a week, all day long. And so we're helping people learn how to move, stand, and walk again. We'll use different pieces of equipment here. We also have our community, as you mentioned, and that's just when we have events for all of our clients to get together, whether it's Christmas parties or Halloween parties or dinners, where we can all take over a restaurant, which is logistically very tricky with people with a lot of wheelchairs coming in, but where we can take over a restaurant and we can all get together and spend time with one another. The other thing that's on the website is there's a link on the website that describes the book, Unparalyzed, Learning to Move, Stand, and Walk Again, Volume 1. And there's also a link to MAS Manufacturing. That's MAS, and then the abbreviation for manufacturing, MFG. So MASMFG.com is MAS Manufacturing. And that has links to the USA and the Switzerland companies that produce the MAS. And for those customers that purchase the MAS, which is usually hospitals or clinics, we sell the equipment, and we also sell a series of different courses in teaching them how to use the MAS.
Wow. Man, you are really changing lives. I'm going through your websites and seeing all these people and the looks on their faces. I can imagine the hope that they have, changing the quality of people's lives as well, and probably extending their lives because, building muscle and maintaining it, I think is kind of important in staying alive, isn't it? I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've all seen that commercial where, they tell you that, a body in motion stays in motion.
Yeah.
I'm not copywriting anybody when I hear that, but it is definitely building muscle, but in order for that muscle to build, you have to build the connection to the nervous system. The nervous system controls and coordinates everything in our body. And if the nervous system isn't firing properly to a muscle, that muscle is not getting the signal to contract.
So reestablishing that whole signaling network, building it up, all that good stuff makes all the difference. Anything more we haven't touched on that we need to tease out to people to get them to buy the book and inquire about your services?
I think that we've touched on a lot of different things. I don't know if you have any other questions for me regarding this.
I think that does it. It's in the can. I noticed that on the MASMFG.com site, Moss Manufacturing, it says you can inquire about Moss for your clinic today. So you can click through that link if you have a clinic or know a clinic, or maybe you have a loved one in a clinic like me. And, all the help we can get just to get people moving, get people muscular, and being able to walk again. I mean, that was when I was a child. I remember seeing a gentleman who climbed a high tension power tower, those giant ones that you see across the desert and stuff. And they were doing it for fun. He didn't realize that if you do get close to those things, they will arc to you. And, he climbed up it and he got zapped by the electricity. He's just being a kid, teenager sort of thing, just adventuring life. And he fell to the ground. He was paralyzed for life. And I remember seeing him in a wheelchair just going, oh my God, I just can't imagine the horror of and the empathy that I felt of what he, the rest of his life was going to be like. And so having, these sort of options, having these availabilities to improve people's lifespan, to improve the quality of life for them, just what a great job you're doing, man. I mean, I almost feel guilty just being an entrepreneur right now because I just make widgets to make people happy. You're changing lives, man. You're seriously.
I'm making a widget too. It's just this big steel widget right here.
It changes people's lives.
Oddly enough, I've seen the same thing you saw. I saw somebody climb a power line and arc and get zapped and become paralyzed. And that was when I was younger too. But, again, like I said, the nervous system controls and coordinates everything. So not only does it affect movement or motor function, but it affects feeling, sensory function, but it also affects bowel and bladder function. It also affects whether or not somebody can sweat. Your sister might even know a little bit about this, is that it's easy to overheat.
She has that problem. Yeah.
Right, because the perspiration system, our evaporative cooling system, doesn't work. They can't produce sweat. And so there's so many things. It affects your dilation and constriction of your blood vessels. And so your blood pressure is all messed up. And so there's so many different things, since the nervous system controls and coordinates everything, that affect a paralyzed person. But what we find is if we can teach them to move properly, get them to stand, get them to walk, if we can give them that, many of those functions begin to improve.
That's awesome, man. I mean, you're doing a great job. Congratulations. And
thanks, Chris.
And I'm sure this gives people hope. Please share the message if you're hearing this out there with your audience, with people, and let them know. I'll be talking to my friends and relatives about it because, as you age, things break down, people's hips go out. I remember my mom had knee surgery and had her knees replaced, and her getting back to the full functioning, took time. And of course, one of the things they tell you is you got to start juicing those knees and working them. You got to get all the fluids and, all the stuff that's in there working, kind of like oil in a car. And I was like, what? I would, if they replace my knees, I'd lay in the bed for the first week. I'd just be like, I'm just going to lay here, my knees. And they were like, no, you got to get moving. And, even something like your machine could probably help with that and get that going on. And, movement is so important. I remember when I used to be pretty, I don't know, what's the right word, lethargic, stationary. I was working too much sitting. I started having eczema on my legs. And I was putting cream on it and dealing with it and whatever it was. And you know what it was? It was that I just wasn't exercising and
Absolutely.
activating my like those sweat glands that you were talking about. And so I started exercising, working out and running and stuff, and my eczema disappeared. I've never had it since. And it was I don't know if this is true for everyone. I'm not a doctor, folks. I don't want to start any conspiracy theories. Don't start a cult over this. I have to make the disclaimer. Don't start a cult over this. JFK did it. No, I'm just kidding. Whatever.
I'll get my foil hat.
Yeah, we should wear those during the show. Anyway, there should be like a foil hat segment of the show. Anyway, thank you very much for coming to the show. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Chris, to share this information with you and your audience. I appreciate you.
Thank you. And thank you for inventing something that makes the world better and people's lives better. We need more people like you. And I'm sure that advancements come, they'll do whatever. So we'll look forward to volume 1. Folks, order up wherever fine books are sold. Unparalyzed, Learning to Move, Stand, and Walk Again. Volume 1 out on paperback on January 28th, 2025. Also hardcover and Kindle. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you guys next time, and we'll get a few comments in here. This guy Jeff, I'm dyslexic today. This guy Jeff is pretty cool from YouTube. Thanks, Peter. I'm finding this really informative. Thanks for sharing from Lorca and all that good stuff. Is that hat he's wearing for sale? I would love to purchase a camel or a red one. Sounds like you need a merch. You need a merch there.
We do sell the hats. Yeah, sell the hats and the shirts. Yeah.
Click with the website, folks, or reach out to him. Thanks to my audience for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time. There you go.